Good evening, East Vancouver. How's it going? Glad to be here, because it's not far from home and I didn't have to travel. I had to go out and do a performance at Kwantlen and Langley 2 days ago, and it took me 2 hours to get there and 2 hours to get back, and it was only a 15-minute performance, so, you know, I was like, oh, yeah, okay, whatever. But, yeah, I know that we're here to talk about housing here in Vancouver, you know, and I know that specifically in the Grandview-Woodlands area, I know that it's an issue that has been on the table a lot. I work, as Noemi said, in the spoken word community. Naturally, spoken word artists like to talk, and so there's a lot of opinions floating around the room whenever we sit down for business beers. And housing in the density is one of the things that has been, you know, tabled a lot lately. People wondering whether or not we're going to get gigantic condos somewhere on the drive or anything like that. And I think it's really good that all these people are here to help contribute to this forum. And I really encourage all of you to try and take as much part in the actual planning and discussion as possible. The reason that I really like this topic as well is because my home is right here. I live right on Commercial Drive. I've lived here for the last 8 years. And just as I was preparing for this story, actually, I had to do a little reminiscing. And I realized that the 8 years that I've lived on Commercial Drive is the longest that I've ever lived anywhere in my entire life. Not even when I was a kid living with my family did we ever stay 8 years. And so I had to call my mom and rub that one in, be like, yeah, I got 8 years in one house, Mom. How you doing? But yeah, so I kind of want to get, I guess my story though, it actually starts up in northern BC. It starts in Terrace in about 1996. In Terrace in 96, I just graduated from high school, and I had a partner at the time, and her and I wanted to come down one summer and visit her mother. Her mother lived in Vancouver, and so we hopped in the Jeep and drove down from Terrace and came down here, and the very first place that we went to was Commercial Drive, because her mother lives, as so many East Vancouver Aboriginals do, in some of the native housing over on Gravely Street. And so we went there and spent the next couple days just kind of enjoying Vancouver and walking around. And then the weekend came, and her mother went off to do some things by themselves, and I had the morning to just kind of walk around and explore. And so I went walking down Commercial Drive, and it was probably, this is one of my first memories, and I remember that I told this story over and over and over again, because for me it kind of capitulated what I thought of the bohemian aspect of East Vancouver. And so it was a Sunday morning, probably about 10:30, and I went walking down Commercial Drive, and on the east side of Commercial Drive at Commercial and 4th, I believe, Commercial and 5th, right near Café du Soleil, there's a bench. And there was a lady sitting at this bench, and she had a pink dress on. She was an elderly lady, I would say probably about, you know, it seemed to me that she must have been over 65 at least. And she had a bright pink dress on with these bright pink bloomer kind of things. They weren't nylons, they were bright pink bloomers, and these pink high heels and pink fingernails and pink everything, pink hair, bright pink hair, and she had a little pink poodle sitting next to her. And I was just laughing, and I walked up, and she was smoking the biggest joint that I had at that time had ever seen in my entire life. It was bigger than my finger. And just this pink lady just sitting on Commercial Drive, just smoking a joint, and I went, wow, all right, I like this place, this is cool. And so, yeah, I instantly fell in love with the community itself. And so we went back up to Terrace, and then a couple years later, when I was living on my own in Jasper, I decided to come back down to Vancouver, and the very first place that I went once again was Commercial Drive. And exploring some of the stores and the cafes up and down the street. At that time, I was kind of like a homeless punk rock kid, and I was hungry one day. I went walking up down Commercial Drive and walked into Café du Soleil, not Café du Soleil, but Café du Soleil at Commercial and Kitchener. And yeah, confusing, right? And asked the guy if I could just have some hot water to make a tea bag. And he said, you look a little hungry, man. You want something to eat? And I was completely taken back by that. Because, you know, like spiky street punks don't often get offered free food. And at least not in restaurants. But Commercial Drive's a little different, apparently. And so the guy gave me a muffin and a tea. And yeah, sat down and talked to me. And just kind of encouraged me to go out and seek some of the social work that you can help and that can help you. And, you know, some of the other outreach avenues that we had in the city. And once again, that struck me as something that was really cool, that he would take the time to kind of guide me on my way. And now, fast forward for a few years in my life, and the reason I fast forward is because those were the years when I first started to fall into my addiction. And in about 2004, I had probably been battling addiction for about 4 years as a crack addict. And I was up in Terrace again, and just on the tail end of my addiction. I had been trying to get out of it for quite a long time, and, you know, falling off the wagon and getting back on and falling off the wagon and getting back on, and slowly the stretches off the wagon got longer than the stretches, or the stretches on the wagon got longer than the stretches off. And I knew that I was ready to come back down to Vancouver and try it out here again. I'd messed up a couple years in Burnaby and didn't really work. So I came back down to Vancouver, and the first thing that I did, I got my backpack and hitched all the way down here. I had nothing but a backpack and full of books and a chessboard, a couple pairs of pants, and a nice warm coat, and that was about it. But it was January, and you know, I figured I'd be all right. I got down here and I got up, set up in a housing shelter down on Homer and Pender, the Belkin House. And stayed there for about 5 weeks while I was working my butt off at a construction job that I got at the Labour Unlimited store, or Labour Unlimited office just up the road on Commercial Drive here. And I worked there for about 5 weeks until I had enough money to get an apartment. And so I went walking down, immediately the first place that I wanted was Commercial Drive, East Vancouver. And I went walking down Commercial Drive one sunny Sunday morning, and not really looking for a place, but just kind of keeping my eyes open. And I got to Commercial in Kitchener, and there was a little sign in the window, and it said, apartment for rent, $6.95. And I went, I can afford that, that's cheap, all right, cool. And I went inside and talked to the landlady, and it was a beautiful apartment on the top floor of the building at Commercial Drive, right at Commercial in Kitchener. And, well, actually, no, it wasn't a beautiful apartment, it was a piece of shit, but I won't lie. But in my mind, it was exactly what I wanted. I closed my eyes and I went, this is what I've always wanted. This is beautiful. And Commercial Drive is my driveway. This is fantastic. So I got the apartment and spent the next 4 or 5 weeks just kind of getting my life in order and keeping my head clean. I'd managed to stay clean this entire time, and I met a nice lady, and that always helps keep you on the up and up. But, you know, things are difficult. I was coming out of a difficult time in my life, and so things got hard between her and us from time to time. She was also coming out of a difficult time in her life, and one day we had gotten into a little bit of a spat. And so I went stomping down Commercial Drive, kind of like grumbling to myself, and I'm sure people were just kind of parting the water for me, because when I get that face on, I can like lurch forward, and people go, oh, okay, I'm getting out of that guy's way. So I went walking down Commercial Drive, and I walked past Café du Soleil, and there was a sandwich board sitting out front, and on the sandwich board was written the words Poetry Slam. And I didn't know what a poetry slam was, but I've always been full of poetry, and I was angry, and I felt like slamming something. And so I went inside and asked the people there, I said, what's this poetry slam? And they broke it down for me. The way a poetry slam works is that you have 3 minutes to get to the front of the room and deliver a piece of your own composition. You can have no props or musical accompaniment, and you get judged by 5 randomly selected members of the audience that are chosen beforehand, and hopefully don't have any bias. And so I figured, hey, why not? I'd been spending, the one good thing about my addiction was that because I was sitting at home getting high and being crazy, I had nothing better to do but talk to myself, and so I had done years of practice in spoken word before I ever knew that it existed as an art form, just by sitting at home and like, I gotta talk to somebody, blah, 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 blah. And so I got up there that night, still nervous as you can be, and got up and did my first poem, and got off stage and went, oh my gosh, and it was the first time I'd ever performed in public in front of anybody. And my palms were all sweaty, but they said, hey, you did a really, really good job. You want to come back for the second round? And I went, oh my gosh, I didn't know there was a second round. Okay, I can do this, I can do this, I can do this, I can do this. And I had half a glass of wine and 3 sugar cubes and went, okay, all right, I'm good to go, I'm good to go. And I hopped up, I did my second poem, and you know, got a good reception from the crowd and was like, whew, I did it, I'm a performer, yeah, all right. And sat back down, and it just so happened that that night was Vancouver's Last Chance Poetry Slam. And the Last Chance Poetry Slam is the last slam before we select our Vancouver Poetry Slam team, which is 4 members who will represent our city at various events throughout the year. And so I came in second place, as it happens, but the first place finisher was a legend in our spoken word community by the name of Mighty Mike McGee. And Mike McGee, yeah, big noise for Mike McGee. He's an amazing guy. Check him out on YouTube. He's absolutely amazing, Mighty Mike McGee. But he came in first place that night, and he's from San Jose, which made him ineligible for Vancouver's Poetry Slam team. So technically, I had finished first in Vancouver's Last Chance Poetry Slam on my first time ever performing in life. So they asked me to come back for the semifinals a couple weeks later, so I went home and started furiously writing. And the very first poem that I wrote was a piece that dealt with my addiction. And very, very harrowing and very honestly and very vulnerably dealt with my addiction. And I came back to the Poetry Slam 6 weeks later and got up and performed that piece. And towards the end of the poem, I have a moment where I say that I'm going to stop and give this entire room one last look right square in the eye and say in a voice loud and cocky with pride that today is day 101. And it was the first time that I had ever in my life made it to day 101 on my own without being incarcerated. And there was a moment where the audience just kind of gave me an applause, and I had to kind of hold my breath from not cracking up. And I got off stage, and I knew that at that moment, I had made myself accountable to something larger than myself. I knew that I never wanted to come back down there having fallen off the wagon and try and lie to these people and say, today's day 140, knowing that I wasn't being honest. And at the same time, I never wanted to have to come back down and say, today is day 8. And by making myself accountable to these beautiful people who were up there so honestly and openly sharing themselves and doing what the storytellers this evening are going to do, which is telling stories and communicating with one another. It struck me in a manner that I hadn't been struck by before. And I realized that it was something that I wanted to be a part of. And so I spent the next, well, I guess how many years have we been now? I guess it's been about 7 years that I have been deeply involved in Vancouver's creative writing and spoken word community. I've had the honor of being on Vancouver's Poetry Slam team 4 times, and over the last 6 years I've had the honor of working with an organization called Wordplay that puts spoken word performers into high school classrooms in order to generate and foster a love of spoken word and creative writing as a whole. And we've seen that come back in spades over the last number of years. The 6 years that I've put into this classroom, this year we had our first ever, the second ever high school poetry slam called Hullabaloo. And it was an inter-high school poetry slam. We had 16 teams from throughout the Lower Mainland and Vancouver Island come together to compete, and it happened on Commercial Drive. And I know that the work that we have done in our communities and in the schools around there have really given a lot of effort and energy towards that. And so, yeah, I would just like to take the time to once again thank you for having me come down here and share my story with you. I hope all of you have a very great night, and I look forward to hearing everybody else. Thank you very much.